viewers, my name's Cara. Today I would like to welcome a lot of people to this video. I would like to welcome witches, pagans, neo-pagans, Wiccans, people on a spiritual path, people on a religious path, people who are looking to find out what the heck we mean in the pagan witchy community when we say we recommend that you record your path progress, people who love writing physically, journaling, people who love journals and notebooks, and people who love office supplies. Welcome all of you to this video. I really feel like this will be helpful for you if you fall into any of those categories, because what I'm going to do in this video is talk about all of the journals and notebooks in which I physically handwrite progress of my path, how I keep track, how I record my personal spiritual path. This is a video I've been thinking about doing for a few years, and today I thought, you know what, let's get all the notebooks together, let's finally sit down and do it. So this is something that we talk about a lot in the pagan/witchy community. We always recommend people beginning their paths in this area of spirituality, or really any, which is why I said people on a spiritual path, people on a religious path. This applies to you too. We recommend that you track your progress, that you record your progress in some way. And while obviously since about 2009 I have been making videos on YouTube, on my personal channel here, CuteWitch772, as well as on the Pagan Perspective collaborative channel where different people ask us questions every week and then we talk about them in videos. Obviously, I've been recording my path's progress that way, and wow, are there a lot of older videos where I'm like, yeah, things have changed since then. But I also am a fan of handwriting and actually physically journaling. Some people may choose to record their practice by keeping an audio recorder, doing voice memos on your phone. You might choose to type it out and store it on a computer, on a flash drive, whatever. It's just recommended that you somehow record your progress on this path. I always recommend that. Obviously, I'm going to show you today how I personally do that, how disorganized it can be, how different the types of things that you record can be. I consider myself a lot of the time to be an organized mess. Things do not look like they have a specific organization. They seem to be really haphazard. I have a picture here just of the stack of notebooks and journals I'm going to be showing and telling you about today. Granted, I've been on this path for over a decade, but still, it seems like a lot, and it seems like they are very disconnected and haphazard, but there is always a method for me. But whatever it is, however you do it, whether you do it very differently, like I do it very distinctly, different things in different journals, or whether you have one thing that you just keep everything chronologically, whatever it is, it's just important that you write this stuff down, or type it out, or audio record it, whatever it is, so that you can see how your views are changing, how your beliefs are changing, what you thought when you first read a book versus when you reread it 3 years later and now you've had different life experiences and maybe you notice things differently, you see things differently, whatever the case may be. So firstly, I want to briefly talk about these 3 random notebooks that were originally blank notebooks that were given to me by my mom. This one, which has a really fancy looking cover right now, did not used to have all these designs on it. When I first started using it, it was just a blank journal. I just used it as a regular journal when I was about 10 or 11 years old. And that's around the same time that I started studying witchcraft and Wicca specifically, but I wasn't really journaling about it. I was like reading about it, and then the first mention of Wicca in this notebook was in March 2005, so almost exactly 13 years ago now, when I said, okay, journal, here's an update. I've been studying paganism and Wicca for a while now, and I finally feel comfortable calling myself a Wiccan. I feel comfortable calling myself a witch. And that was the first mention of it in this journal. Then I didn't write anything in this journal for 2 years, and then I wrote a brief thing where I was like, hey, haven't kept up with this journal. I've been trying to keep up with my Wiccan path, although it has been difficult because I can't practice Wicca very openly right now. However, my mom does know about it now. I have told her about it, and now she knows about my study. and that was the last entry in this journal. At the time, I had written, those of you who can read the Theban alphabet, sometimes known as the witch's alphabet, will know that this says Cara's journal. At that time that I had decided, okay, I'm going to identify as a witch now, I consider myself a Wiccan witch now, I wrote that and I put this triquetra and I also put the pentacle on the back. But the rest of this was not here until about a year ago. I ripped out all the pages in here that I had just journaled random stuff on when I was like 10. And so now it's a blank notebook with a really fancy cover that I intend to use in the future. But this was kind of like the beginning of all these other journals. There is, though, I have the witch's alphabet, the Theban alphabet, written in the back from when I was first learning it. Basically, I stopped journaling in this when I got this one. I don't know why I switched. I think it was just because this one had all the other random journaling in it, so I was like, I want to keep this separate. So I started this specifically to be a Wicca-related journal. But it really only has reference stuff in it and only like 3 pages, and then I stopped using it, and the rest is blank. So with my fancy Old English-style stencils, I wrote, I remember Tempest Smith, which I did a video about Tempest Smith recently on the Pagan Perspective collab channel. I believe in God and Goddess. And then I have a moon cookies recipe that I got from a book, but I didn't say what book I got it from. I have a witch's brew recipe, which was for a beverage that I used to make that, again, I got from some book, and I thought I knew which book it was from, but then I couldn't find it. So lesson 1, as you're recording things, write down your sources. Cite your sources. Because you're going to go back through things and want to know where the heck you got it from. And it's much harder to look through your entire extensive library of books trying to find the thing again than if you had just written it down in the first place. And then I have literally one page where I was researching some basic symbolism of the goddess Athena from the Greek pantheon. And so I started doing that in this notebook and then stopped. And the rest of it is blank. This notebook is just a blank journal that I started as just a journal, but specifically, I don't know why, when I was younger, I always had this idea that, like, someday when I die, my journals are going to get given to my children, and maybe they won't care, but they'll pass it down, you know, like, it'll just end up in a box that gets handed down, and somewhere down the line, someone's going to pull this out and be like, oh, great-grandma Cara, when she was 13 years old, wrote us these things. So I would write, like, as though I was talking to my future generations of children's children. Which is like kind of a weird thing, but that's what this journal was. And then this journal gradually morphed into a dream journal. So the last entries are actually from last year when I was using it as a dream journal. This is all dreams, and I would actually write like the whole story of what happened in the dream. But then I have a dream decoder app on my phone from dreammoods.com, which has always been my favorite dream interp website. So then I started just writing down keywords from the dreams, and then I would go and like look them up on the app. But so instead of writing the entire story, I would just write the keywords. And then I stopped doing it altogether in February of 2017. But I did that for a few months. There was also a part in the middle of this journal, after it was a regular journal, before it was a dream journal, when I briefly used it as a gratitude journal, where every morning I had this like next to my chair in my living room, and every morning when I got up, I would open it up and write down 3 things I was grateful for, and my top 3 priorities of things that I wanted to get done that day. And I did that for a couple months. So a lot of these things transform and evolve. This journal, which is the famous unicorn journal that you've seen in my videos before, if you have in fact seen my videos before, this one began as a journal, just a regular life journal. I think we got this from the Scholastic Book Fair. And it was just a regular journal. Like, there's an entry in here in the early pages from, like, when my family went to Niagara Falls. And there's, like, a pressed flower taped into it and stuff like that. I think it was my first trip to Canada. But anyway, then in 2005, so the same time that in that other journal I said, I'm a Wiccan now, I wrote about my first ritual in here. And then there's a few of those, just, like, basic journal entries. But then this morphed into very much more what I consider a grimoire, meaning, for me, the distinction I make is that a book of shadows, or a book of light and shadows, is more like your ups and downs journaling about your path, the things that you go through, the things you feel about it, the things you think about it. Whereas a grimoire is more like a reference book of spells, correspondences, just things like tables, charts, meanings of things that you find in other resources, and you compile here. So that's what this became. I have basic 1-2 sentence descriptions. Again, this is probably from like 2005, where I wrote down like, this is what an athame is for, this is what a ritual bell is for, brooms and besoms, candles, cauldrons, chalices, wands, incense, ribbons, and oils. Just a brief explanation of their use in magic. Then I have recipes. There's literally a recipe card for crescent cookies stuck in here, which again, forget which book I got it from, didn't write it down, learn from my mistakes. But then other things on here, I did say, like, this is the offering stones recipes from Crazy Boy TX YouTube, from their video about how to make offering stones. And then I have a spread on the meanings of numbers in magic, not exactly numerology, but just like the number 1 having to do with unity and independence, number 2, balance and duality, the colors that are associated with the numbers, the planet that is associated with the numbers, which some of these things really differ based on the source that you look to, obviously. But these were just places that I compiled things that I was learning. I have a spread here on color and the different meanings of colors in magic. Some of these things I got from sources, and then as my path progressed and I developed my own associations with things, I would add my associations. Days of the week and what they mean, what types of magic we do, difference in the definition between evocation and invocation, difference between banishing and binding, and then I have these pages that are set up for air, fire, water, earth, and then there's spirit and notes on exercises from the Spiral Dance by Starhawk. And I just sort of made these elemental, the recipe card fell out, I made these elemental headings. I don't really know what the rest of the pages are going to be for. I'll find that out as my path progresses, but I did this a few years ago. I just made the headings for the element pages. And then there's some poems that I've written. There's prayers that I've found in different books that I really liked. There's information about crystals. When you go to a store that sells crystals and there's those little informational cards that tell you what the stone means or what it's used for, I literally cut and pasted those in here. I have information about herbs that my mom and I had, because my mom used to own a gift shop where we would sell things like herbs and incenses and oils that we would make. So I had access to all these herbs, and I started researching what are these herbs for. Because I think it is most beneficial to start with what you have access to. Like, if the only crystal that you own is an amethyst, do as much research as you can about what amethyst is used for. And don't worry about looking up what the K2 stone is for if you don't have one. So I always started with if I had something, and so if someone gifted me a rose quartz, for example, then I would say, ooh, now I have an opportunity to go and learn about this thing that I have that I can use. I didn't see much point in going out of my way to research lots of different things that I didn't have that I couldn't actually use yet. So I researched a bunch of the herbs that I already had. And there's still all these lovely blank pages to fill up in the future of my practice. But that's what this book is. It's mostly the reference stuff. On the other hand, we have my mirror books, which are all spiral notebooks. I believe the term mirror book comes from Scott Cunningham, because I know I referred to them as mirror books in a video once and someone commented like, oh, I don't know anyone else who actually refers to them as mirror books. I read it in something from Cunningham, but I've never heard anyone else actually call them that. I actually call them that, and my understanding of the term is that it's called a mirror book because it is your reflections about your path and what you're thinking and what you're feeling about whatever's going on in your life at the time, our spiritual paths, our entire ways of life. So anything that just seems like everyday journaling could go in here if it's something that I just want to talk about, things that I'm thinking about. But it can also be reactions to things that I'm reading, things that I'm learning that are directly related to my path. So this is actually the first one. It was an old school notebook that didn't have that many pages left in it. Didn't have that many pages to begin with. It was just a one subject notebook. But I picked it up and initially started using it just as note paper for taking notes while I was reading Scott Cunningham's Living Wicca, which is sitting right here. So, and I know that it was this even at a glance because in the front cover of the notebook, I wrote a little table of contents after I got finished using it. So it says that this notebook contains notes on books that I read, Living Wicca, Notes on Pathwork, Paganism by Joyce and River Higginbotham, The Goodly Spellbook, and The Way of the Horned God by Dancing Rabbit, who was one of the original members on the Pagan Perspective collab channel as well. I have his book on my shelf here. This notebook contains tarot and oracle card spread notes from readings interspersed throughout. The By Oak, Ash, and Thorn, which is a book I have over here by DJ Conway, there is a shamanism test in it where it asks you a bunch of questions just to kind of gauge your interest, why you're reading the book, what you already know about shamanism when you begin it, so that this is a perfect example of why we record things, so that when you finish reading the book and you now have new understanding, new experiences, maybe you think of things differently, you can go back and see what you wrote in the initial answers to the shamanism test and find out now if your views have changed, how much you've learned, things like that. So I have my answers to that in here. And then it says that this was a mirror book from June 2011 to April 2014. And the very back of it contains notes from when I was sitting back down with my Fairy Ring Oracle deck, which those of you who watch my videos or have read my readings page will know that I've been reading with that deck for a long, long time. It was a gift from my mother, and before I ever officially started on this path consciously, I was working with that deck. But then years later, so probably like 2011, I was going back through and sitting down and just one by one going through the cards and writing down my own reactions and associations with the cards so that I would have my own ideas as well as the book meanings that were written by the author. So the last four, I started in the back of the notebook, and the last, I said four, but the last pages are notes on the different cards in that deck, and they're color-coded by the seasons because that is the suits of the Fairy Ring Oracle deck. So that's what's in the back. And if you look through the time in the middle when this was a mirror book, there's an entry from 2013 where I wrote, I have this habit of leaving things and coming back to them after a year. In this past year, I started keeping a journal of ritual/spellcraft and a separate journal for my shadow work with the 13 Moons book. So these books tend to be just my general thoughts about things going on in my life and things going on in my path. Whereas this mirror book references these other two little things that I just showed you. So when there is something specific that I want to record, I often put it in a different notebook because I love notebooks and I have so many blank notebooks. So I actually have another stack of probably 5 or 6 blank bound notebooks like this, as well as more spiral notebooks and composition notebooks that haven't been all the way used. I have tons. So anyway, this one was started to be a ritual/spell log. So anytime I would do a ritual, I would put it in here. And this was very much set up like a step-by-step report. So I think this is really when I started writing down. Every entry begins with the day of the week, the date, and the year, the time or the approximate time that I did the ritual. If I was writing it down afterwards, it would be the time that I did the ritual. The location. So I would say, if it was in the field across from the house I was living in at the time, I would say it was in the field, or I would say it was in the grove of trees, and I knew what that meant, or I would say it was at the lake, whatever. And I would write down kind of what the weather was, especially if it was an outdoor ritual. So this one, the first one says, chilly, breezy, clear morning. And then I would write down what I was doing. What kind of magic am I doing? Am I celebrating a Sabbath? Am I doing a spell for a specific reason? What am I manifesting? And then I write down how I'm planning on doing it or how I did it. If I'm recording it afterwards, I write down, this is what I did. And, this is the song I sang. And this is the chant that I used, and these are the materials that I had with me. So I had a red candle, and I had a rose quartz, and I had whatever it is. I wrote all that stuff down. And then if anything, interesting happened during the ritual, of course, I wrote that down too in a little mini journal-like entry. And then there would be, if it wasn't necessarily a ritual or a specific spell, there would just be things that I was working on that I would put in here. So, for example, this one says, Sunday, May 27th, 2012, approximately 5 p.m., I decided to try scrying with my crystal ball. This was the first time I had used my crystal ball for scrying, even though I had had it for years. And so there's a little half-page entry on how I attempted to do that and what I learned from that initial experience. On the next page, there's a little note that says, I was working on candle gazing today. I think my concentration is pretty good. So different little things like that. And then this next one, it says, Esbit, oh yeah. So after this point as well, I started including a little drawing of whatever the moon phase was, right? So I would literally draw a circle and then shade it in to make it look like whatever the moon phase was. So if it was an Esbit that I was writing about, I would draw a full moon. And the next entry actually is from the dark moon, so I have a little filled in circle. Then I started doing that for every entry, and I continue that to this day. So it looks like I started that in the summer of 2012, and I've been doing it ever since in every entry in my mirror books too. So in the years around this time, I started going to Cleveland area Pagan Pride for the first time, and then I went every year since then, so I would write a brief description of those rituals in here too. I was working with a small, informal study group style working group circle, and I would write down what rituals I did with them in here as well. This was meant to be just a record of the rituals and specific spells. However, I have not used this since, I don't know, I think it ended up being mostly just readings at the end. Yeah, and then it started being mostly just readings in 2016, but then there's a few more rituals interspersed. 2017, I started using this again for some readings that I was doing, or just to record spreads that I was learning from other people. For example, I have Katie Flowers' deck interview spread that I learned from her YouTube channel. It's just written in here, like my things are, I think, later in the book, but there's a page where the day I learned it, I just got out this notebook and wrote down what the spread was and what the positions mean. And then several pages later, there are my deck interviews with a couple of my decks. And that's the last thing I put in here. That was 2017. So I no longer record every single ritual and every single spell in here, although I probably should be recording it somewhere. Generally, I have been writing things in the mirror book, I guess, because it's been mostly like classes and things that I go to, and that's all recorded in my mirror books, because that's what I bring with me. So this one here, as mentioned in the previous mirror book, is specifically shadow work. When I was working through this book, which a lot of you have asked me about recently, and I've been commenting back and telling you the title, but here it is again. It's In the Shadow of 13 Moons, Embracing Lunar Energy for Self-Healing and Transformation by Kimberly Sherman Cook. So I initially got this book in like 2011, something like that, started working through it either then or in 2012, might have been, and I still have not worked all the way through it because I got stuck in the middle and I didn't want to skip ahead, but then I worked on it a little more since then. But when I began it, I decided to start using this little Leo journal that I had sitting around, specifically for my notes, working through the exercises from the book. But also, I only write in this book with purple ink. So when the first purple pen that I was using ran out, I got another purple ink pen, and I only write in this book with purple ink. When that mirror book ran out, I started another spiral journal mirror book. Actually, this one began while I was still using the first green one. I got this one out specifically to work through the exercises in the 12 Wild Swans book by Starhawk and Hilary Valentine. So the first pages in this second volume mirror book are from 12 Wild Swans. So those entries overlap with the ones in the green notebook, and then when the green notebook ran out, this became my mirror book. So this is mirror book number 2, 2013 to 2015 is what this says. The Charge of the Star Goddess is written on the inside front cover. So yeah, so a lot of this is reclaiming based because that's really when I started working on it. So it's working through 12 Wild Swans, and then when I was working through Iron Pentacle and Pearl Pentacle on my own for the first time, which Brendan encouraged me to do and helped me with doing. That's Brendan from Pagan Perspective as well. There's notes in here from when I was getting ready to go to Arkansas to speak at Conway Pagan Pride and present my workshops and stuff there and hang out with them. So there's journaling all through there. There's notes about dreams, if a crazy dream happened that I wanted to write about. And every entry has the date, the approximate time, the day of the week, and the moon phase. Even if it's not an entry about the moon, I always put the moon phase. I like going through and realizing when I tend to write about certain things, or if I haven't written in a while and I only tend to write like once a month, realizing that I'm always updating my journal during a certain moon phase. Stuff like that is really cool to see at a glance, so I choose to include the moon phase in my entries. And then, of course, if it is a Sabbath, if it's a solstice or an equinox or anything like that, I write that down in the first line as well. So like this one is 22nd of June 2015, 4 p.m.-ish. There's a little drawing of a waxing crescent moon. It was a Monday, and it says the day after solstice. Oh, and this is when I was doing my annual personal solstice readings, so then it's a recording of my reading for myself that solstice. There's notes from when I went to my first witch camp in here, and then the end of 2015, my last entry for the year 2015, also filled up this book. So 2016 started fresh with a new one. And this also was another notebook left over from school. So don't throw away your blank notebooks. Repurpose them. First things in here were notes from a reclaiming workshop that I went to in January of 2016. This really helps me because sometimes I forget how long ago those things were, or I think that something was 2 years ago, but I checked my journal and it turns out it was only 1 year ago, or vice versa. So having the dates right in here for everything that I've been working on is really helpful to me because time passes in such strange ways. Notes from when I went to an Iron Pentacle workshop. Instead of just working on it myself, I actually went to the class. Let's see, and there's a reference here from 2016. I'm beginning to remember that trances and the like should be going into my ritual notebook, which is this little butterfly one over here. So I reference back to them all the time. Like, oh yeah, I should be writing this in there. Or, oh, I should be putting this in my shadow work journal. So sometimes on the same day, I'll have an entry in 3 different things. It might sound a little crazy, but it's how my brain works. Here in October 2016, I woke up one day and decided to do more ancestor work. So there's like a whole 2-page spread about my ancestors, looking through paperwork that I have, writing down interesting things that I found about them, writing down their names. And then I have like a 6-page spread about how I felt about the results of the election, card reading spreads, dreams and ideas about past lives. Then I started writing up at the top, in the blank area up at the top, I started writing kind of like a subject of what was on that page. So now, even without reading through the entire entries, I can glance at the top, and that's how I know this page is about dreams and past lives, because that's what it says. And then I have one when I was making incense. I have one labeled a good day and one labeled a bad day. Abundance consciousness, full moon in Leo, root chakra, learning about bullet journaling, tarot lessons, studying stuff about the tarot. So now that I have included that little header up at the top, I can see at a glance what's on that page, so I can find things even easier. For those of you who like to use electronic journaling, obviously you can have like links and stuff like that that just shoots you immediately there. But again, I really like the tangible factor of writing on paper, and then even though it ends up with this stack of books, which might not be super convenient all the time, I really love having a physical library. It's why I have so many books, and if you haven't seen, I did a library tour recently where I showed all the books in my apartment, and now I'm showing you the journals. When I started working on my Saturn Returns courses, notes about that are in here. The first few articles that I was reading about Saturn, the planet, and about Saturn Returns, my notes while reading those articles are in here, quotes that I liked. And so this mirror book is still the active mirror book. This is the one I'm using right now. I'm almost to the end of it, actually. You would think I would fill these up like super fast, but I don't write in them every day. I don't even necessarily write in them every week. It just depends on when I have stuff to write down. But also, as you can see, I have all these other notebooks for different specific things, so I'm not always writing in these. So while going through this one, I was working with a spiritual coach who encouraged me to start keeping a manifestation journal, which is similar to a gratitude journal, but it's just kind of worded differently. Instead of just what are you grateful for, it's thinking in terms of the energy that you put out on a daily basis and just how you live your life. You are manifesting things. You are drawing things to you. And so the idea was to write down the things that I've already manifested in my life, the things that are making me happy, the things that I think are really cool. And that could be anything from an actual, awesome result to a spell that I was looking for, or it can be my cat was snuggling with me today and that made me happy, so I write that down. Or if you're out walking on the street and you see somebody with a cool bumper sticker on their car and you're like, oh man, I saw this cool sticker, or this person was wearing a really cool shirt. Literally anything like that goes in here. It's just positive things that are manifesting in your life, whether you think that you had anything to do with it or not. It's the idea that your vibe attracts these good things to you, right? So anything that makes me happy was going in here. And this was daily. I did it daily for a month, and then I did it on and off for a while. There's a few poems in here because I was carrying this around in my bag. So then if I was sitting somewhere and I felt like I wanted to write something down, I would get this out. So there's a few poems in here, but mostly it's the manifestation journal. I got this at the dollar store. It's got this cool blue neon edging. It's bendable. Also, in the past year or so, I've been doing more tarot studying and more astrology studying, so I started writing that stuff in here. And again, this was from classes in college, and there's 2 different classes in here. We only ever used that many pages. So then the next year, I would use the same composition books, and so every composition book I have from college, except one that we actually had to use starting from the beginning and starting from the back for 2 different things, so that one is just that class. All the other composition books that I have from college have this many pages in the front that have 2 or 3 classes in them, and then the rest are blank. And because I don't like to waste things and I want to fill them up, I started writing down stuff that I was learning more about tarot and year cards in here as I learned new spreads. So then I started doing some readings in here. There's astrology notes, followed by then more tarot notes, more tarot year card notes specifically, spreads that I was working on for my Saturn Returns course, astrology herbalism notes, some ancestor stuff, and I still have this many more pages to go. So this notebook is pretty much tarot and astrology related things, but it's mostly notes if I'm reading a book, some of those tarot books that I did review videos of. If I was taking notes while reading them, that kind of stuff was in here. So it's not journaling my thoughts, but it's stuff that I'm learning about. So it's study notebook. And then the last thing I have here is the giant notebook that I was using for my, actually a few classes. Again, there's a few classes in the front. This is a folder actually in the front. This many pages, if you can see those, were for a couple different classes, and then after that, it was my Psychology of Prejudice class that I took, which I use and then morphed into my Pagans and Prejudice workshop / talk that I do at Pagan Pride events, UU churches, private coven groups, stuff like that. So I have all of my notes from the class right here that I refer back to all the time when I'm doing different versions of the workshop, looking at what things do I really need to include, what can wait, because I have to fit into different time constraints. So I'm always going back through these and looking at these notes. There's notes from when I went to Arkansas for Conway Pagan Pride and was preparing to present this workshop there, followed by just a rewriting of the things that I thought were most important. So I'm retaking a lot of notes, rereading the textbook that went with this course and writing things down again because there were areas of the textbook that we didn't go over in class. And then because my work on the Pagans and Prejudice workshop and everything is right in this notebook, and the notebook is huge, I still have all of these pages left, and it's college ruled, so they're big pages with small lines. I can fit a lot on them. I started also keeping notes for my Saturn Returns courses and my Moon Magic courses and anything that I'm working on that you have already seen some iterations of or that you haven't seen at all yet. My coursework, creating courses work is in this big notebook along with my class notes from psychology and my Psychology of Prejudice class. I know there are more notebooks scattered around here. I'm pretty sure there's another one in this room where I've used a few pages of it for deity research. And I had like a page for each different major type of pantheon across the world, and then as I learn more about them, I find their page and fill in some more information. I know there are other smaller journals that I took to witch camp that I have notes in there. And then I have a lot of different notebooks with just like, if I'm watching a YouTube video or I'm reading a book and I want to take down notes, but let's say I'm at my grandma's house and I didn't know that I was going to want to take notes on it, I'll just grab whatever is available to take notes in. So there's a lot of notebooks around the house that have maybe like 1 or 2 pages of notes about something relevant to my path, and then the rest of it is like scrap paper or whatever. But these are the main things. So we have courses that I'm creating, studying type stuff, gratitude manifestation, 1, 2, 3, volumes of mirror book, which is reflections. These are the actual journal-y type things. Shadow work, rituals and spell logs and readings logs. The grimoire for reference stuff. And the 3 random journals that are actually like mostly just journals, but that now are back to being like blank and ready to use. So if you're going to start journaling and recording your practice, or if you're going to record it in any way, decide what kind of things you want to record. I definitely recommend having something like a mirror book that is just a journal that you can journal about anything that comes up in your life, and you don't have to feel like you can't just write about something that happened in your day because your journal's supposed to be only rituals, and this isn't a ritual, it's just a thing that happened. You should definitely have a place that you can record just things that happen. And if you want to keep all these different things in one ongoing chronological notebook or whatever, go for it. If you want to keep them in different things, just think about that ahead of time. And these are all things I already had. Most of these were given to me. The only thing, like I said, we bought this from the Scholastic Book Fair years ago. So when I started using it for my path, I already had it. I didn't go out and buy it for that purpose. And I bought the little neon blue. This was $1 at the dollar store. But other than that, these are repurposed journals from classes, from school, things that people gave me. I'm a Leo, someone gave me this. These are all things that my mom gave me. Kitty one is also from a dollar store. So look around and see what you already have. If you already have things like this. If you don't, dollar store. Dollar store and dollar stores are the best place. They have such good things. They have bound ones as well as, like, you know, they'll have like hardcover ones that are bound like this, as well as things like this, little teeny spiral ones. They'll obviously have regular like school spiral notebooks. So you do not have to spend a lot of money on different journals if you do want to keep different journals and you don't already have them. But I definitely recommend having somewhere just to write down your thoughts. If you want to keep a dream journal specifically, go for it. I've actually had things, somebody gave me something that was supposed to be just a dream journal, and I've never used that journal ever. I think I tried to give it to my mom and she left it at my grandma's house. Like, we don't use it. I just put my dreams interspersed wherever. You want to have one for records of when you do tarot card or oracle card readings if you're a reader. That's cool. You can either keep stuff that you're learning about the tarot right in that same place, or you can be studying and learning aspect different from the records of readings that you're doing for yourself. I like to keep my readings interspersed right within my mirror book because it's kind of part of the flow, but obviously there are readings interspersed in a lot of different notebooks. If you want to keep a separate one that is a ritual log, go for it. I ended up thinking that wasn't as easy because I just kept going back to my mirror book, and then I was like, oh, this should go in my ritual log because I'm talking about a ritual. But I was talking about my thoughts about things, so it made sense to me to meld them together at a certain point. If you want to keep a separate one for shadow work, that's cool, but it's also important to integrate our shadow with the rest of our lives, so you might want to just integrate your notes about the different things. You could color code it with ink so you know that the different entries are about different things. If you're like me and you like colored pens, this is why I said people who love office supplies are going to love this video. Yeah, and then I recommend having one place that is maybe the more fancy thing that you have. It's more permanent. You can't like move around the pages. I know there's a lot of journaling things now that you can pop out the pages and put them back in, so that's cool. Or you can always use a 3-ring binder. It's a very classic way of doing it, keeping your notes so they can be moved around. But I started keeping this, like I said, just for the reference things, the things that aren't going to change. These are the basic, the system of elements that you use for your path. So for me, north is earth, is winter, is midnight, all the different associations that go with the 4 directions, the 4 classical elements that I use. That's not going to change for my path. If I want to write down different elemental systems, I have pages for that. I have tons of pages for that. But this is the kind of thing that, this is just information. Maybe little chants, blessing, what the colors mean, what the numbers mean, stuff like that. We've gone through it. So that's the kinds of things that I record. And obviously, as I go through my path and I start studying different things more than others, I might pick up a different notebook to start putting those things in. And so, right now, a lot of the notes are very tarot heavy because I've gotten into more studying tarot formally than I ever have before in my path. There's also a lot of reclaiming related notes because I've been doing more reclaiming classes and stuff with that tradition. Whereas when I started, there's just a lot of, my first rituals officially and my thoughts on them, and as I was learning and going through these different books, Scott Cunningham's books, the Shadow book, doing these exercises, writing things down so that I can look back and see how I've progressed. And then, of course, the videos, which some of the old videos seem very old. Let us know in the comments what kind of notes you like to take, whether you like to physically write them down, type them out, or keep audio notes. What works for you? Do you currently record your path? And if not, what kinds of things might you want to start recording? Yeah, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.